Today I'm cutting up 4 graphic t-shirts and sewing them back together in a fun and interesting way. You can do the exact same technique with solid color t-shirts if you want a simpler effect, but I'm going to be cutting right through the graphics. So if that sounds like fun, then you're in the right place. Hello everybody, welcome to Catherine Sews. Thank you so much for joining me today. My son went through his closet and he's given me 4 t-shirts that all have different graphics on them, and they're all in those gray and black tones, and I want to see if I can make something fun out of the 4 t-shirts. I want to use all 4 of them together in a fun way that might end up with 4 t-shirts, maybe just 3, we'll have to see. But I want to cut them up and sew them back together in a similar way to how I did this t-shirt, which is like a triptych t-shirt, 3 t-shirts cut up, put back together. I made 3 shirts from 3 shirts. So it's a really nice way to upcycle something without creating any waste at all. So I'm going to kind of apply the same thinking, but change it up a bit, because however you cut up your t-shirts is up to you. Those cuts don't have to be vertical. They don't have to be symmetrical. They don't have to be straight lines. You can really cut it up any way you want to, as long as you cut up all 4 the same. All 4 of these shirts are about the same size. So I'm going to be cutting them up the same. Like I'll cut them actually together and then just rearrange the puzzle pieces. Now, I did want to say though, if you want to make your t-shirts a little bit bigger, then you could take 4 t-shirts and end up probably with 2 by taking more than a half from each of them. And so I'll show you that on paper. Let's start on paper and I'll show you what I'm planning to do, other options of what that you could do, and then also that option of how you could make shirts that are a little bit bigger. So just before we start though, I also want to let you know that in today's video, I'm also going to show you a way to take your serged edges, put those on the outside, but then zigzag them down flat so they resemble more of like a cover stitch or cover seam. I like the idea of playing around with serged edges on the outside, but I don't always like that look. I don't want it to look unfinished or like wiggly seams. So I'm going to play around with zigzagging that edge down, and hopefully we end up with a really nice seam finish that adds an interesting element to the design. So if that sounds good, then let's get right into the paper demonstration. So if I lay my t-shirts all on top of each other, and if I cut them all together, then I can mix them all up like that and have 4 new t-shirts. But I don't have to cut them just in that simple way. I could make vertical cuts. Now this would make the t-shirt skinnier. Having 3 seams all running vertically, that seam allowance is going to start to make a difference. And it will start to get a little bit skinnier. But it is quite a nice effect. I think that looks good. You could play around with kind of cutting an X shape. It doesn't have to be symmetrical at the neckline, and it doesn't have to all converge in the center. I think it's safest to avoid going into the armhole, but if all of your t-shirts are exactly the same, you could cut straight across the top of the armhole there, but your cut lines don't even have to be all straight. Let me show you that. If I kind of cut in a curve and in a curve, then that can be really fun too. But all of these would end up being about the same size or a little bit smaller. If you want to go bigger, here's a different way. We won't be cutting 4 t-shirts all together. We're going to cut 2 and 2. And so one of them I would cut a little bit left of center. And the other one I would cut a little bit right of center. And then the skinnier bits are going to go to waste at this point. The length, if we wanted to mix up all 4, you can cut the length like that. Then we'd be sewing 2 bigger pieces on each side. So you'd still be mixing up all 4 pieces. You'd end up with 2 t-shirts that are both bigger than the originals, and you would just have to give yourself a new neckline. So that new wider neckline would work out just fine. Alrighty, so that's how you can make it bigger. For me and for my t-shirt, I think the one that I liked the best was maybe the curve. If I cut in like this and maybe something like that, I might just do that. So I took a minute to smooth out my 4 t-shirts, and I've got the smallest one on top and the biggest one on the bottom, but you can see mine are all very close in size. So now this is the scary part, but I promise it's the only scary part of the whole project, and that is doing the cutting. So to make the cutting a little less scary, I'm going to take a scrap of soap and just draw my lines through in a curve like that. And then the other line is going to come from the underarm to a little bit lower down on the other side. So a curve like that. Got to make sure we like that before we cut that. I think that'll be good. And along the cutting line, I definitely want to make sure it feels smooth. If there's like a wrinkle underneath, when I cut through that wrinkle, it's going to make a jaggedy edge, which is something to avoid if you can. I'm going to try it with my rotary cutter, but that's, 8 layers of t-shirt knit. Here we go. Oh, no problem with the rotary cutter. Wow, scary part's over. We survived that, no problem at all. Alrighty, now it's just a matter of mixing up my pieces and serging them back together. So I might need to lay this out on the dining room table. That just gives me more room. So maybe I'll take this all upstairs. I rearranged them on the dining room table, and I didn't love all 4 of them. I spent a few more minutes rearranging them into just 3 t-shirts, kind of selecting the bits and pieces that I like the best. Maybe a little crazy, but I thought it would be fun. So now I'm back downstairs. I got everything, all the pieces rearranged into what I think it's kind of a good way. I don't know. It does look a little crazy at the moment. But what I'm going to do now is take everything to the serger. I've got it clipped back to back, wrong sides together. And I'm just going to serge all of those vertical seams. The ones on the bottom are fine, are easy, but there are some differences in the lengths. So I'll have to rehem probably all 3 of them. The vertical seam in the tops goes right through the shoulder and down. I'm going to try to kind of number them with the clips. So this one is number 2. This over here is number 1. And this is number 3. So I'll put 3 clips. Stalling is over. Let's go to the serger. So I've set up my machine with all gray threads, but the top looper, so the second one from the right, I put a darker thread in there. I've got 4s for the tensions all the way across, just to eliminate any loopiness, because this serging is obviously going to show. I've got the differential feed set at 1.5, so it's not allowing my seams to stretch out. I made the width of my stitch as narrow as possible, and then I think we're ready to go. On these curves, I'm just going to have to be careful that I'm keeping edges together. And I don't want to stretch the knit because I don't want it to start curling. Good, so I'm happy with how that serging looks. So I've got 6 little seams to serge like that. When you've got angled seams, you don't want to match them corner to corner. You want to match them at the sewing line. So my serging is a little bit of a skinny seam allowance, so I'm just matching it right there, about a 1/4 inch in from the edge. And then again, just taking care to make sure my edges aren't curling and that they are staying together. Okay, so all 6 seams are serged, and now I just want to take it over to the regular machine and do a little zigzag on this edge, just so it can't lift up. I think it looks way better when it's laying flat, so let's try that. At the regular machine here, you can really now see what's the good side of the serging and what's the bad side. So if you're still familiarizing yourself with serging, this is the good side. And I want to have that side laying up. I'm going to be doing a little zigzag right along that edge to just hold everything flat. And I've also just put in a ballpoint needle, just so I know I'm not going to be damaging this knit fabric and making little holes. Okay, here we go. The little center notch on my presser foot, I'm aiming just to get it just a little bit onto this edge. I don't want my zigzag to be going over and visible. I want it to be really snuggled in on that edge. And I think that's looking good. I like it. And I'm making sure this is open flat. You can imagine it would be quite easy to have extra fabric caught under there. So open it out flat and go. Good, I like that. I'll be pressing these seams flat at the iron. It looks a little wiggly right now, but I think that the serged edge zigzagged flat, I really like that effect. Okay, so I'll do all 6 like that. Can you see that it looks a bit dimpled here? But the iron, I think, is going to just take care of that. There you go. That's nice. That looks good. I like the look of it. Okay, the bottoms are all done. I love the look of it. You can see the little zigzag on the back. Somebody that watched the vlog that I was talking about this in just asked the question, why do you want to do a zigzag there instead of a straight stitch? And I think that the zigzag just really helps seal that edge down flat. If I did a straight stitch, I'd want to be exactly on the edge. And if I'm not exactly on that edge, then that edge can still lift. The zigzag just gives me more coverage over that edge to really keep it down nice and flat like this. So the bottoms are all done. And so now it's the tops, the 3 tops. I moved the clips to the neckline. So I've got 1, 2, and 3. That actually helped quite a bit. So now I'll be serging this whole seam that comes right up through the shoulder seam and down the back. So the exact same process 3 times. I'm having to kind of shape it at that shoulder seam, get it to lay nice and flat. Like you have to kind of be the boss. Good. So nice. So here you can see what I mean about the shoulder seam, that my new seam kind of curves around in there. So you just have to shape that nicely. So now all 3 go to the iron. I've got it right over the ironing board. So satisfying. Good. So the 3 top sections are done. The 3 bottom sections are done. And now it's time to put them together. I definitely don't need to do anything with my serger tails. They're just going to get cut off in this next step. But I want to match up seam to seam. And on the side here, there's a little V. That might prove to be a bit challenging. We'll have to see how that goes at the serger. And a gentler V here at the top. And seam to seam at the back. And then it's probably helpful to have 1 clip in between. Okay, I'll clip all 3 like that. And then it's back to the serger. I wasn't sure if these were all going to fit together on this horizontal seam because the t-shirts are slightly different sizes. And you know what? Everything fit together nicely, except for 1 little section here. And you see how the gray is just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to just try to ease it in. I'm putting more clips in this section. It's not a huge difference. It's just a little. So I'm going to just try it. And if it does end up looking gathery or puckery, even after I iron it, if it doesn't look good, then what I might need to do is take this t-shirt in at where a side seam would be. There isn't a side seam on this one, but I could just fake one in to make it a little bit smaller there, so that it matches the one below it. But I'm going to give it a try first and we'll see. But if you do encounter that problem, that's what you would have to do, is just take in the seam that's bigger, even if there's not actually a seam there. So I'm going to start at the place that's going to be the most tricky, which is that point at the bottom right. When I serge around, I know I'm going to want the point to be sitting like this, and so I want the good side of the serging on this side. It won't look good if I have to push my seam allowances up around that point. They're definitely going to have to go down, so I need the top part facing up. So I get my good side of the serger here, and then my point can face down. So I'm starting like this. The point of this V is going to come past the point of the V here because it's seam allowance points that you want to match. So if you picture seam allowance going on both sides of this, that point right here is what I want to match to seam allowance on both sides of that. So right there. So it's just like a little 1/4 inch seam allowance, and it's the point of the V's that you're matching up. And now I'm just going to start in here as close as I can to that point. And this is the section where I had a lot of ease that was troubling me, but it actually seems like it's going to be fine. I want these vertical seams to definitely match. So again, it's the seam allowance spot that I want to match. So a little bit in there matches to a little bit in there. Not really the ends of the seams, but the seam allowance, like the sewing line of those seams are what I want to match. And I want to make sure I'm cutting off all my yucky threads. The V at the higher side is no problem. It's just a much more gentle point. And I can round it off, no problem. And as I come back around to that tricky point, I want to now align my seam allowances this way, like organize it so my edges together on this side. Good, and I should be able to just come right down off that point. Okay, great. That looks pretty good. Yes, I think that'll be fine. When I zigzag that edge and give that a press, and I'll tuck under my little serger tail so I catch it in the zigzag, that should be just fine. Okay, so twice more like that. I'll just show you that corner one more time because that is definitely the tricky part. So I've got it all kind of opened up, and I want to bring that point just past the V here. And I'm going to hop on there. So before I hop on, I just want to arrange so that my edges are together at the start. I've got it all opened up here. This is the ending. This part has to just be open for me to get in here. Edges together here as I start. And then all the way around. And as I get back to where I started, now I bring those edges together that had to be opened up so I could get in there. And then I'm just going to sail right off that point. I'm going to bring the excess of the gray fabric, the underlayer, bring that over, but make sure I'm not opening up too much under there. So there's my point coming down nicely. And now you see why I definitely wanted to have the good side of the serging on the upper layer so that as that point comes down, it's the good side that shows. So that's nice. And then back to the regular machine for that zigzag that again is 2 millimeters wide and 1.4 long. And now I'm going to just take my serger tail and tuck it under so that it gets caught into that zigzag. Here we go. And then zigzag right on this loose edge, just as before. So that that edge just gets sealed down so nicely. I love it. Okay, and then coming right back to that point, I just want to make sure it's all sitting nicely, and then I'll just clean up that point. That's pretty nice. I'll give that a little press, and I think that'll sit nice and flat. So good. 2 more times like that. So that point just turned out so nice, and I'll just give that a little press now. You can kind of manipulate it with your hands a little bit. All the wiggles just press right out. And then all 4 graphics meet in the middle in such a crazy and interesting way. And then on the back, I like that too, that the shapes come together with just the plain t-shirt knit. The shapes look really nice. So that is the section where I had lots of these, but I think I've convinced it to behave. Awesome. Press all 3, and then we'll look at the hem. So all 3 t-shirts are together, and they just need a proper hem. So I just want to smooth it out and cut straight across. There we go. Okay, so now it's back to the serger. Okay, and then I go all the way around the bottom of each. Alrighty, so then I've got 2 colors of gray thread, a light and a dark, and then coming down and separating and going into a double needle here. So I'm going to do a double needle hem, which means that, well, it means a couple of things. You don't necessarily need to do a serging because the double needle puts a zigzag on the back. The reason I like to do a serged edge with a double needle is so that I can feel it more, because when you do a double needle hem, the double needle shows on the right side, so you have to have that hem underneath. So I want to be able to feel it, so that serged edge makes it a lot easier to feel. So I'm just feeling that serged edge with these fingers and just guiding that right toward the needle. I kind of want to go slow and steady so that my thread doesn't break, but look how nice that looks. I like with the 2 shades of gray, so I've got the speed just at about a little less than 50% so that I can't accidentally floor it. A double needle or twin needle is a very nice technique to use. Okay, that looks beautiful. I'm happy with that. So I'll just finish off these 2 hems and then we are done, and I'll show you the finished product. Okay, so that's so much fun. I had a blast doing those, and I think they're so fun and interesting, ranging from the simplest of the 3 to the most crazy and complex of the 3. I think my preference is the one that's kind of in the middle. But as I said at the beginning, you could do this with 4 solid color t-shirts, and then you'd end up for sure with 4 t-shirts. So that makes it a really great sew to sell. And I think if you did this as a sew to sell, those would just look great hanging on your rack, all 3 or 4 together. I think that could really be a nice and pretty quick way to sort of build a little bit of inventory for whatever you're selling. So I think this is a cool t-shirt. I'm really happy with the results. It's just something different. It just feels a lot more like me than any of the 4 t-shirts on their own did. I'm also super happy with that faux cover stitch of doing my serging and then zigzagging it down. I love that effect. I'm definitely going to be using that one a lot. So I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you for being with me right till the end. I always love and appreciate that. And until next time on Catherine Sews, you take care.